I did just want to go through a few kind of magnesium fundamentals, which gets me excited, but hopefully it'll get everyone else excited. Just, I'm so fed up of this whole thing of, but you can get magnesium in your diet. Men, children? Man. What's the plural though?
So I got to laugh
Whereas
at this.
we need to be looking at cell solubility.
Okay. Is
What
that
do you mean? I teach you amazing things all the time.
Of course you do, my love.
The digestive system is taking that shit for itself. It's like, screw all the rest of the parts of the body. I need magnesium too. I'm going to take that shit and feel great. I feel like glycinate is just like on something at the moment. It's not the supplement that I would break the bank on. See, this is the problem with magnesium because my mind just goes on rants and rants and rants.
Magnesium.
Yeah, I'm really excited.
I know you're excited, girl. I know you're excited. I can feel you, like your vibrations of good energy coming through.
Yeah.
Can we just start by saying, to start this video off by just saying this? This really is, alongside vitamin D, this really is the invisible deficiency.
Yeah.
100%. It's the deficiency that we know about, we don't talk about, and we don't talk about enough. And because we're in the industry, we feel like we do talk about enough, but the general population do not understand how deficient they are in magnesium.
I don't even know if we talk about it enough in the industry, to be honest, because the amount of people that I've had come across my desk that have had suboptimal magnesium and haven't even known it. And then if you give someone some magnesium when they don't have enough, the difference is insane.
Yeah.
Like, you know, all of the people that have come to me and been like, oh my God, you're magical. And like, it's great because I'm like, yeah, I'm absolutely magical, but I'm actually not magical at all. It's literally just magnesium.
It really is. It really is. But like magnesium, like it is just it's such a small thing that you can add into your body and it can have daily benefits. And the thing is, like, we must take it daily. It's not about taking it for a short stint of time. It's one of those base minerals which has it controls over 300 different actions in the physical body. And I was doing a little bit of like Dr. Google around the background of this before we did this video, and if you read some of like the various like research papers, mixture of blogs, you read their references, the figures are between 10 to 90% of people are deficient. So there's a real big depth of it. So in my mind, everyone's deficient. I just went after reading it.
I don't have research to back this up, but I would 1000% say it's closer to 90, just based on like what I see in my vicinity and what I read in like case studies and papers. It's definitely closer to 90. But I think, so magnesium is 1000% what I would call a foundational building block to health, kind of like vitamin D. Definitely should be in your foundational arsenal. And as you mentioned, one of the reasons that a lack of magnesium can mess you up so much is that it doesn't just have its own job to fulfill in the body in terms of like, say, direct magnesium deficiency, direct jobs. But magnesium is also a cofactor, as you said. It has a role in hundreds of different reactions and pathways in the body. So if you don't have enough magnesium, you're not only going to get the symptoms of low magnesium and those direct functions start malfunctioning, but also you can have all of these other issues going on because there's certain pathways that if you don't have the magnesium link to almost spark that pathway to work, it can't happen. And so you're going to start seeing breakdowns in loads of other areas that might not traditionally be related to magnesium. So I think that's a really important thing to be aware of. And it's one of the reasons why I just love this mineral so much, because it can do so much for a person. Even if they have a small deficiency or like they're slightly suboptimal, it can just do so much because it just floods your body and gets it working again. So I'm going to link the last magnesium video we did down below. Like realistically, that last video was a little bit off the cuff. It's like a 15-minute rant. I think you just threw a question on magnesium and I went a little bit psycho. But off the back of that, we did get a lot of questions around magnesium and a lot of questions specifically around what's the best form of magnesium, because there's so many arguments out there. And I had a little look actually at what is out there in terms of like what people are saying is the best or worst form of magnesium. And it's so funny because I actually probably found like a video and a blog and a paper for every single form saying it's the best and also another one saying it's the worst. So I thought let's do a little bit of a deep dive into the different forms, and I think let's talk a little bit about how you need to be thinking about magnesium, because it isn't so simplistic as to say necessarily that this is the best form for every ailment for every person. It's a little bit more nuanced than that. But before we go into the actual forms, I did just want to go through a few kind of magnesium fundamentals, which gets me excited, but hopefully it'll get everyone else excited. I'm sorry, you've probably heard these so many times. But yeah, so what I mentioned, magnesium is essential for your body to run efficiently. It's not always going to directly show up as a clear magnesium deficiency issue. You know, if you have hormonal imbalances, pain, fatigue, diabetes, anxiety, gut dysbiosis, any of those things, there could be a magnesium element, or at least magnesium is foundational in those issues. We do not get enough magnesium. So, like, I'm so fed up of this whole thing of, but you can get magnesium in your diet. It's just eat green leafy veg, just eat nuts and seeds. We do not get enough magnesium. There's a couple of reasons for that. Soil mineral depletion is a massive one. So I think people need to understand that if you Google, you know, what are the nutrients in a carrot or how much magnesium is in spinach, the answer that comes up for you is based on levels that we tested decades ago. So another reason that a lot of us have insufficient levels of magnesium, because I don't think it's always accurate to say deficiency, there's a spectrum, but another big reason is environment. So we now know that things like pollution, alcohol, caffeine, medication, high sugar diets sometimes, inflammation, stress, exercise, all of these things can actually require or demand more magnesium from the system, so they can deplete magnesium in the system. So if you're an athlete, for example, and you're working out hard all of the time, you would have a higher magnesium requirement than an everyday person. If you live in a city or if you take a lot of medication, your magnesium requirement is going to be different than, say, someone that's living on a hilltop eating their own homegrown organic food and who got a boatload of inheritance, so they have no financial worries in the world. Their magnesium is probably great. So those are a few of the reasons why we're in this situation where we're seeing so many people with not enough magnesium. Also, I will say as well, there's a lot of research that's suggesting, not confirmed, but suggesting that the original calculation for our magnesium requirements, so roughly speaking, between 300 and 400 milligrams of magnesium is the daily recommendation, depending on if you're a woman or a man, child, all of that. That sounded like I said man, child.
I am, thank you.
Men, child? Men, children?
Man, child.
Man? What's the plural, though?
I don't know.
Men, children?
Asking the wrong
Man,
person.
children? I don't know. Anyway, so there's a kind of like we discussed with the vitamin D, I would argue that the daily recommendation for magnesium is actually too low, because a lot of more specialist institutions and more specialist research will show a much more significant requirement. Plus, we have to remember that daily recommendations are based on this is the absolute minimum you need. And if you're showing signs of low magnesium, then you're probably in a place where you need higher levels to replenish, particularly if your environment is depleting your magnesium. So if you have signs of low magnesium, but you're stressed out, you drink 10 cups of coffee, you smoke, you live in a city, like your body is actively using up more magnesium. So you really need to make sure that you're getting a personalized recommendation to actually get you back on track. Does that make sense?
Because your body's like degenerating. And when I was reading up a bit more about it, that as like over the years I've read about magnesium, like a lot of degeneration of the muscles, the body, the brain, all happens. And then we contribute to other health conditions where it could be something so simple that our basic mineral need or nutrient need of magnesium isn't being met, which is just bonkers. I think that something so easily fixable could have such chronic, such chronic bad conditions for a lot of people further on we're going on. So it's like, it boggles the mind that we haven't updated the research. And I think, I say it boggles the mind, but we could understand why it doesn't as well.
Yeah, it was like, does it really boggle the mind? There isn't a lot of money in nutrition research. So.
Yeah, I suppose that's the truth.
I think it's pretty obvious why the research hasn't been updated.
Hells yeah.
So that's a little bit of a background in terms of, just another rant about why magnesium is so important and why I get so excited about it. But on to the different forms of magnesium. So I think most people will see that if you kind of Google magnesium supplements, there's magnesium citrate, there's glycinate, there's orotate, there's L-threonate, there's taurate, there's lactate, there's sulfate. There's so many different forms of magnesium that I can understand why it's quite confusing. And in my mind, it's unfortunate that a lot of people are putting out content that comes across quite blanket and definitive in saying, this is the best form of magnesium. Or sometimes I think some experts will say this is my favorite form of magnesium. So then there's an assumption that, that must be the best form. Mm-hmm. But what I would like to highlight is the kind of clinical mindset around magnesium, because actually the reason there's so many different forms, it is to do with absorption rate and bioavailability, but they do different things. So different forms of magnesium are going to be more efficient or less efficient depending on what you're trying to target, where your levels are at, where your own baseline is at. So like how your body is functioning, because replenishing magnesium levels in someone who's relatively healthy and their only issue is maybe that they have really depleted magnesium levels versus someone that's been chronically ill for years and their body is totally degenerated, it's going to be a completely different thing. And sometimes it requires one form of magnesium, but often, particularly in the severe cases, it can require a little bit of cycling and a little bit of building up in different areas. And I'll explain how that works in a minute. But I have a little bit of a bone to pick as well with the way we do this kind of magnesium absorption rate and bioavailability research. A lot of it is based on in vitro studies, first of all, which, they're an isolated lab study. It's not a good representation of how things are working in the body. So there's that piece.
And I also think, T, what a lot of the research is based on is water solubility. Yeah. It's so I gotta laugh
Whereas
at this.
We need to be looking at cell solubility.
Okay, so the magnesium studies that are done, right? It's all about if it's water soluble, that it makes it more bioavailable. But when you ingest magnesium, it doesn't get ingested into frigging water. It gets ingested into acid. And so if you actually look at elemental magnesium, how much elemental magnesium is actually in there, that it's actually magnesium oxide contains more elemental magnesium. And so it's around about 60% in magnesium oxide, elemental magnesium, and in magnesium citrate, it's around about 15%. So when you consume magnesium oxide, people talk about its bioavailability, but if you actually read the damn study that they're talking about, it was done in water. Like, do you understand like what the industry has done? Some scientist or researcher has said, "Oh, look at this magnesium in a glass of water because this citrate's it's dissolved in it better. That means it's higher absorption."
Yeah.
No, that you're conning people. You're chatting shit there.
But it doesn't represent how the
body
works.
It doesn't, does it?
And then even if it's not one of those studies and say it's an animal study, we also have to remember that animal systems work differently to human systems. But also, I mean, there aren't very many human studies out there, but even the human studies, they're very isolated from the reality for most people. And we're getting kind of healthy participants. You know, we're not looking at actually the effect
Chronic
of,
people,
chronic magnesium depletion over a lifetime and the effect of absorption on that.
You know the magnesium, because I remember you used to say to me about saturating the area. You know, when you have like an inflamed, like you have like a painful muscle or something, you would saturate the entire area with the magnesium, let the body soak it up, and you'd always find out the difference a lot better. But it's the same with like the differences in magnesium, because I know you're going to go into it a little bit more, but it made me laugh because magnesium oxide, because it's got higher elemental magnesium, and when it's in the actual physical body and it breaks it down, because you literally taught me this and I couldn't believe that you taught me this, was like is
what
that
do you mean? I teach you amazing things all the time.
Of course you do, my love. The magnesium, when it breaks down in the stomach, because it's like poorly, they call about poor absorbability, which is bullshit, by the way. Because it has a more longer time to break down in the system, it actually has a long release mechanism. So technically, we should be calling magnesium long release, whereas magnesium citrate, because it has lower elemental magnesium, when it gets into the system, yes, the magnesium levels go up quickly, but then the body excretes the magnesium even quicker because it goes up quicker, then it excretes it quicker.
Yeah, well, I think, this is the perfect highlight for my argument as to why you need to adjust and cater the magnesium for the individual. I'm going to touch on oxide because I know this is a bugbear for you, because to be honest, a lot of in university, often oxide is given a bad name as well. I think because traditionally it was one of the original forms that were created, and a lot of the old studies, it was a lot of synthetic forms. The research and data isn't great.
Or traditionally, we don't check the research ourselves, and we
Yes.
go through third remove, and then we actually don't read the full research, and we read the conclusion, and then misinterpret it or misinform people.
Yeah, I mean, basically, what I'm trying to get at is, it's not the sexy form of magnesium, so it's getting a bad name. And yeah, there's a history there as to why there's a little bit of a bad name. But let me explain. So on that whole magnesium oxide, because there's actually an advantage to that, because you mentioned elemental magnesium. So oxide actually has one of the highest levels of elemental magnesium, around about 60%, sometimes slightly more depending, which is amazing. And it can actually be a benefit in some situations if you're very depleted in magnesium, but you also have an issue further afield in your body that requires magnesium. There can actually be a benefit to taking something like oxide that's slower to release and break down, because what happens a lot is when we're very depleted in magnesium, the minute we ingest it, the digestive system steals it. Like, the digestive system is taking that shit for itself. It's like, screw all the rest of the parts of the body. I need magnesium too. I'm going to take that shit and feel great. So so this is where other forms come in. So you mentioned citrate in comparison to oxide. Citrate is one of my favorite general and gut digestive forms because it is broken down quite quickly. You can reach bowel tolerance quite quickly with it. It will give a good general replenish, and it, particularly with like digestive issues like constipation and stuff, it sorts that shit out really, really quickly. I love it for that. But it's not great at reaching issues further afield. That's where something like oxide comes in, because that can be really, really effective, for example, with migraine and headache.
Brain health.
In fact, there's a lot of really good studies that use magnesium oxide. And that's the reason, because it isn't as efficiently absorbed in the digestive system, it can have the time to bypass and go straight to the brain, so it can work on that. And sometimes that's actually an important thing. You don't necessarily want everything to be the most bioavailable, because how is that going to help if you have a sore neck? Do you know what I mean? But equally, if your body is so depleted that you are kind of using up any sort of magnesium that you take immediately, then you probably will have to go in with a few different amounts or a few different forms to really kind of like tune up your body, if you will. So another form that I wanted to address is glycinate, because I feel like glycinate is just like on something at the moment. Everyone is like, it's the best, magnesium glycinate, that's the only thing to take, da 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 da. If you have anxiety, if you're stressed, blood sugar balance, there's a little bit of research to suggest that that can work a little bit more efficiently. So yeah, sure, glycinate. However, if you're coming from a place of significant magnesium deficiency, then I would be looking at something like a citrate, or a chloride or a sulfate along with the glycinate, so that your digestive system isn't immediately using that up. So things like the citrate, the sulfate, and the chloride, they're the cheaper forms of magnesium. And also they're the ones that usually the body can tolerate in slightly higher amounts. So when I say magnesium sulfate, I mean Epsom salts. So go soak yourself in an Epsom salt bath. Really, really good way to kind of overall replenish magnesium levels.
The best way.
You love it.
The best way.
Chloride, it's often found in, those kind of magnesium body butters and the sprays and the balms. Again, wonderful way to kind of replenish your levels, particularly if you're not in a situation where you can have a bath. If you have a migraine, if you have backache, muscle ache, you can just spray that on, let it dry in and absorb in. So that's a really good way of kind of building your global magnesium in an inexpensive way, because I do think we need to talk about cost as well. So in a really, really depleted state, consider things like your citrate, your sulfate, your chloride as kind of an adjunct to whatever other magnesium you might be taking that's a bit more specialist. So some of the other specialist ones I would think is L-threonate. I don't know if you've heard of L-threonate. It is really expensive.
It's you know why? We're registered as a novel food. It's going for a novel food application in the UK. So the company that did the research here are a US business, and they, from what I understand, they've registered in the USA, and because they've got the licensing for it, it's like a pharmaceutical. They can charge what they want. So until it becomes off its novel food in 5 or 6, if it gets the application through, maybe 5-6 years time, then the prices will fall of it. But the research on it, the actual study on it, nothing special.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a massive amount of research in it. There's a few pieces that are quite, decent. But that makes sense. I was wondering, I was like, why is it so bloody expensive? But that
It's
makes
a pharmaceutical
a lot of sense.
approach.
Yeah. But anyway, with L-threonate, you'll often see it referred to as supporting brain health, because the research that is there shows that it's quite efficient at increasing the magnesium levels in the brain. So that can be quite beneficial when you're dealing with a situation like depression, anxiety, cognitive degeneration, so Alzheimer's, memory loss, things like that. Definitely think about your L-threonate there. Another one that, I don't know if you've noticed this, but a lot of people are talking about malate recently. And I wonder if that's to do with the fact that, one, it's seen to be quite highly absorbed, or well absorbed. but specifically it seems to be quite effective with conditions like fibromyalgia and pain. So I do wonder if that's why I feel like it's having a little bit of a moment, because it's kind of like an old school, you know, form that we used to utilize a lot back in the day, but it's definitely getting a bit of a resurgence because there's been more studies coming out looking at it with relation to those pain issues and fibromyalgia, which I think a lot of people are experiencing at the moment. But again, if you're experiencing things like muscle aches and pain, do look at your global magnesium levels along with more specialist, because if you have a global depletion, then malate might take a while to, you know, knock that fully out, if that makes sense, in a positive way. What is orotate is another one. It's kind of, I would say it's a new kid on the block. Also very expensive. But really interesting because it's actually naturally part of it's a natural substance that's involved in the construction of genetic material, so like DNA and things. And there's a lot of interesting studies coming out looking at its involvement in the energy production pathway, particularly for heart health and heart balance. So it's one that a lot of athletes are looking at, or people that might have, you know, health conditions in their family that are looking at, or where you're targeting that area specifically. Again, very expensive. So I would really kind of keep that in mind for a more specialist viewpoint. Lactate is another one, not really as common. It's usually used kind of as a food additive. I don't know what form they use in that magnesium water that you saw. If it's lactate or if it's probably more of like a sulfate or something. I don't know. But yeah, so lactate is another form. Again, usually used in food as an additive, but it can be used as a supplement, particularly in the case where someone is really, really sensitive, like highly, highly, highly sensitive, because you can take it in slightly higher doses and there tends to be less digestive issues. Because you have to, again, think about the sensitivity in your body when you're choosing what the right magnesium is for you, because some magnesiums will, you know, hit you very quickly, and if you're quite sensitive you might, you know, get diarrhea very quickly, digestive upset, you know, just kind of like throwing that equilibrium out quickly. You might find that you need a low and slow approach, again utilizing the kind of transdermal, so like on the skin, your oxide, which is a little bit more slow release. You know, if you're a hypersensitive individual, those pathways might actually be more beneficial. And also I think when it comes to re-nourishing the body or using supplements to re-nourish the body, so like isolating something that is found in nature and taking it, you know, in a higher dose, it is really important to remember the origin of that nutrient. So traditionally, magnesium is a mineral, it's a salt. It would have been found in the rock beds. So traditionally, we would have gotten most of our magnesium from drinking water, from eating salt. So salt was used as a preservative a lot as well, and from swimming in the sea. So whereas a lot of people aren't getting it from those sources anymore because water and salt is often depleted of magnesium. But I think it's important to remember that actually originally our body was designed to get the high doses of magnesium from those places. And it's interesting that the research actually reflects that, in that the skin is incredibly efficient at absorbing magnesium quite quickly, which is why I really like those kind of topical transdermal forms as a way to kind of gently and softly replenish levels quite quickly. Interestingly enough, there was some research that found that actually even the act of manipulating the kind of magnesium, so if you have a balm or even if you're in a bath, just kind of rubbing those salts against your skin can actually encourage a higher rate of absorption as well.
Well,
so
it's even interesting is the fact that, like, you know, when people say, oh, you can have too much magnesium, but kidneys will actually excrete excess magnesium, and a lot of people don't realize that if you take in too much, your body is able to regulate it and then push it out via the urine. This is why citrate, they talk about citrate because it boosts magnesium quite quickly, but then the body excretes it quite quickly because it's like, oh, there's too much in the system.
Yeah.
And so that's why I keep saying, like, oxide has its benefits. It's one of the old school original magnesium. The same as magnesium stearate. It's a fatty acid. And, you know, our body's made up of magnesium stearate in our system. It's part of the fatty acid tissues. So I think I do... Listening to what you're saying, T, it does make me think that sometimes we've like magnesium is just dressed up in different forms, but it does the exact same thing. It's like someone just changing their outfit, occasionally saying my outfit's better than your outfit, but technically they all have their benefits and their sources for the system. But what you're trying to say is just take magnesium, man.
Well, I think on a base level, just take magnesium for sure. But I think we have to remember that we're living in a very sick society. So what you were even saying about, you know, you can't overdose on magnesium. It would be pretty hard to overdose on magnesium. But technically you probably could, particularly if you're someone with kidney issues or you're someone with, you know, on certain medication.
I'm just talking general, sorry.
No,
I'm just talking general. I'm not saying
no, I totally know what you're saying, but just to clarify it because someone will, you know,
misinterpret it.
Kick up. But like you know, I think we just have to be conscious that we're living in a sick society, and for that reason, not everyone is going to be able to cope with, you know, a high dose of elemental magnesium immediately. Sometimes you need to kind of tweak things and personalize them to get because the goal is just to get enough magnesium in the body and continue that. Like, that's the goal. I don't really care how you get there as long as you get there. But I just think it's really important to highlight the fact that this idea of there being a best or worst form is just total misunderstanding and reductionist thinking, because that's just not how it works. And also a little bit of like, on that, you know, don't feel bad if all you can afford are the less expensive options, because I do think sometimes the more expensive options are really being pushed. And I always say there are certain nutrients for sure that I'm like, spend your money or don't buy them at all. Fats is a big one that I'm always talking about. But things like magnesium, there are less expensive options. So yeah, do consider that as well. It's not the supplement that I would break the bank on unless I needed that specialist L-threonate or orotate, something like that. So yeah.
Yeah. This is a very good deep dive into magnesium, I think. I actually thought I've actually learned even more, which makes me want to question even things even more. And I think our understanding, it can be, some people get too intense with that research paper. They're like, there's one research paper and this is what has to be one. But I do think there's more to magnesium than meets the eye.
I think we have to remember that, you know, research is great in one way, but we have to apply it to the individual. We have to add common sense, because otherwise it's not going to work. We're not, like, who are we trying to serve? Are we trying to serve the god of research, or are we trying to serve the individual and help them to feel better? I know who I'm trying to serve.
That's it. That's where we're at.
One more thing before I forget. Sorry. See, this is the problem with magnesium, because my mind just goes on rants and rants and rants. But one other thing to mention is, if you are quite depleted in magnesium and you're trying to bring it up in your body, it's a good idea to try and eat some of the traditionally high in magnesium foods along with that, because there's a lot of things in food, like your polyphenols and your antioxidants and all your different fibers and things, that we haven't, you know, extensively researched, but we have a good idea that there's probably a lot going on in there to indicate to your body how to break down and absorb magnesium. So even though I was saying that, you know, a lot of food is depleted in magnesium, it's still a good idea to eat those foods along with your magnesium supplementation program, because it'll most likely indicate to the body, okay, there's magnesium coming into the system now, so let me digest and process this efficiently and properly. So yeah, I wouldn't say taking a supplement is an excuse not to take, your leafy greens, your nuts, your seeds, all of that. So
I got a question for you at the back of that then. So based on everything you've said, out of like curiosity then, would it be better to take magnesium like in one go, like just saturate the body, or do you think it'd be better to like take magnesium like split over the day? So take like some with breakfast, some with lunch, some with dinner, or if you're fasting, some whenever you break your fast, basically take someone with those meals.
I think it kind of depends. Like in theory, particularly if you're very depleted and you're trying to bring your levels up in a stable manner, I think spreading it throughout the day can be a nice, gentle, balanced way of replenishing those levels. But in terms of compliance, usually that's going to reduce compliance. And the most important thing is getting enough magnesium daily. So if you're that person that you're not going to take it spread out throughout the day, just take it once and make sure you get enough. And also magnesium is that type of thing, because again, our main sources would have been, salt and water, or like, going for a swim in the sea. We have a pretty good capacity for absorbing it. So yeah, I wouldn't worry too much unless, your practitioner is giving you a specific reason that you need to take it more slowly.
Oh, okay. And okay then. Hearing about the different forms, what I kept thinking was, then don't you think that you should not just take one form like magnesium citrate, that you should actually maybe take different forms? So like do like a magnesium citrate mixed with an oxide, or with a a threonate with like a magnesium sulfate bath, because the magnesium works in different aspects of the body. So would it not be correct in thinking that we should take more than just one form?
Oh, yeah. I think in a lot of cases, in terms of optimally rebalancing the body, probably having something with a few different forms is going to give you the best chance of re-optimizing your levels most efficiently. I've spoken a few times about like, oh, it'd be if I was to create a magnesium supplement, like what would I do? So yeah, but also, if you're in a case of depletion and you don't have a lot of options, maybe you're on a budget, like just get enough magnesium is the main thing. Your body will figure it out eventually. A lot of the specialist magnesium that we spoke about is more a case of what's going to act on a specific thing more quickly. So you're thinking with that clinical mind, whereas it might take a little bit longer, but as long as you're replacing your baseline magnesium levels, you will get there eventually. So yeah, but I definitely like the combination of internal and external if you're trying to correct low levels quite quickly. So, taking something internal like a capsule or a powder, and then also having your bath or putting on your magnesium cream. That actually reminds me, there is, with magnesium, my least favorite form is a big tablet. So magnesium can take a little bit to break down. We see like a slight increased absorption benefit with powders or kind of like effervescent kind of capsules, things that your salts that are going through your skin, your creams, we see like a little bit higher absorbability there. So if that's an option for magnesium specifically, I would consider that. Obviously, with certain things, some of the more specialized magnesium, you might look at a capsule. I don't love a tablet. Those are generally have the most buffers, fillers. They're the harder ones to break down, particularly if you have a weakened digestive system. So if you don't have, super good levels of stomach acid and, that whole system is a little bit weakened, your tablet isn't going to be the best option.
No, that's interesting. I remember the story of this, not story, an old past story of a couple of dudes I used to like work with. One of the guys used to talk about the they're all like the jiu-jitsu dudes. They take something called ZMA, I think it's called.
Oh, that's so common.
Yeah, like zinc. Is it zinc, magnesium, and it's like calcium or something in there? And they took it for like weight training. Weight trainers took it, but it's like in a tablet form. And the tablet was huge.
Yeah.
It was
Those
huge.
are chunky.
Jesus,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I think what we'll do is we're going to link all the different forms of magnesium, ones that we've personally tried and used,
Yeah,
in
yeah,
the
yeah.
description.
Because I
And
definitely have some favorites.
yeah, and I think we both definitely have some favorites.
Will I also put a list of the ones that I specifically don't like? Or
No,
that
no,
would be
let's not do that. Let's not.
That would be
Let's start
mean.
not calling people out. We're not there yet. We will.
I'm joking. I'm
We're
joking.
tease. Right. Thank you everyone for joining us on this very good magnesium deep dive.
Yeah, and please leave any more magnesium questions below, because any excuse to create another magnesium video would make me extremely happy. So, yeah, hope that answers some of your questions.
Thanks everyone.